In Albania and in Seychelles, we have the same key individual, the same operators, Al-Kayat brothers, Qatari, billionaires, very well known, to have absolutely complete despise for law, protection of areas, and with the same target, the same obsession to develop luxurious project resorts in some places which are considered by UNESCO as our collective heritage. So it's our collective responsibility now to be imaginative and to join the aspiration of the Albanian people and Seychelles also activists, and I want to applaud them, and to send a clear message to these guys. We will succeed to put an end to your greed.
Wow, this is quite a revelation, honestly. I mean, you see, sometimes it takes people like, such kind of people to explain things like the way they've done, where they have to connect the dots in two different places. And you see, the only reason why you wouldn't really think that these two projects, one in the Seychelles and the other one miles away, separated by an ocean, such as the one in Albania, is because you wouldn't even think of it. Unless somebody knows the inside system and the way things work, you wouldn't even know or even suspect. So all these things is very, very strategic. It's something that honestly, we really thank people like him that are able to connect some of these issues and to see that this is what's currently happening. So we've got a project in the Seychelles, the other one in Albania. They're all interconnected, and it's only when you start pulling the threads and start investigating and seeing deeper, that's when things start showing up. You see that, these are basically two crime scenes here. Yeah, crime scenes. This is what they are, nothing else. So basically, it's the same story told in two different oceans. You can't say, there's no way you can argue about that. Now, I think to understand this whole thing, we've got to look into the political context, because this is what is important to try and understand why these things are happening and so on. Now, let's start with Albania. So in Albania, there's an island called Seychelles. This is the very island that has been at the center of all these protests we've seen in the past few weeks, past few months. It's inhabited, it's a former military zone, pristine condition, protected wildlife. It's beautiful, okay? And the son-in-law to the US President, Mr. Jared Kushner, through his investment firm, had a $1.6 billion plan to build luxury hotels, villas, and apartments. And the wife to Jared Kushner actually said, "This is a great find. We found something that is great."
It's an unbelievable, beautiful 1,400-hectare private island in the middle of the Mediterranean. We were on a friend's boat, and we stopped for a swim. Effectively, that's how we found it.
She discovered the island, right?
Yeah.
That was very funny. And the sad at the same time. Well, we have only one island.
So you'd have thought that people with money would have probably even assisted the government or whatever it is into the conservation process, and just to protect the wildlife, to protect the pristine condition of all these species and so on and so forth. But that is not actually what happened. So if you really think for a moment, this just shows you just the mentality of how people think. So you go into an island, you see it's beautiful, and the first thing that comes to your mind, instead of championing the conservation process, is I think we need to build something here. We need to build good hotels. We need to make sure that, we can make use of this land, which is crazy. Okay, so the whole idea is let's own this. This is okay for us to own because we can. And I know there's been a lot of criticism around this because the Albanian government and the Prime Minister Edi Rama granted this project strategic investor status, but that was not the case prior to that. They've had to pass laws, legislation to change all this from being a protected area into something that this investor group can actually build on. Before you know it, there were bulldozers, barbed wires, and this is where you saw people questioning all these things and citing corruption as a result of what actually happened. Protests that have been going on for weeks and weeks and months, but still no one is backing down. The government is not backing down. The investors are not backing down. I just want to say that this issue in Albania has been challenged through the legal channels, and 4 people are being investigated currently, including a government minister. Okay, they're citing abuse of office, all sorts of issues, document forgery, and everything else. So it's very clear. Okay, this is the same playbook. Okay, and target the vulnerable countries, give them money, override their laws, whatever it is, build luxury, for the elite on the land that does not belong to you. And, when things get heated, you just say, well, fight it out in court because you've got the money and because you can do that. So this whole thing is all wrong, and this is crazy. Now, here's the connection that brings us to the Seychelles. I know you've been waiting, and so on and so forth. Now, I did talk about this issue on the Assumption Island a few months ago. You can click and watch that video right there. But we've got the Aldabra Atoll, which is a heritage site, and a Qatar-based firm is building 37 luxury villas, which is also a very pristine condition. We've got all these giant tortoises and so on and so forth. And whatever the case, you can see that there's very little or no interest in honoring these environmental impact assessments, that are carried out in such kind of places such as Albania and the Seychelles. Now, in the case of this Gulf-based family, when you see the money, when you trace the money, you find that there's a 2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia into the son-in-law's fund, and the Qatar's connection through the firm building in the Seychelles. This is a pattern of powerful people, okay, backed by the Gulf money and American political connections, targeting small, vulnerable countries, in which you cannot deny the fact that, that is why when the money is involved, even the politicians themselves, high-level people, they tend to forget that they've got, places to protect, they've got the natural heritage that they have to conserve, that are usually a pride for their countries. But no, when they see the dollars flashing on their screens or in their eyes or whatever it is, they forget about all of these and do things to benefit them. And it's quite a shame, really, just to see the way all these things have happened. And who knew, if people like him do not expose and actually voice out in the manner that is done, who would have known that such kind of things even exist? Because they're being done in, miles away from each other, miles and miles apart. There's even oceans that separate them. You wouldn't even know. So it's crazy to know that this is the case, and I don't know how you feel about that, but this is something that should not be allowed to happen, not in 2026 and not in this day and age.